At the airport in a city in the United States, Brandon wakes up in his trailer after a terrible nightmare in which he saw a woman in despair at the bottom of the ocean. Realizing that he might end up being late, the man wastes no time in getting ready for another day's work. Meanwhile, Jed waits for his girlfriend with his friend Kyle, as they are about to embark on a trip to a resort in Cabo. When she arrives on the scene, Ava explains that her security guard Brandon will accompany her, as her father won't allow her to go far without their protection. Despite knowing that his girlfriend is the governor's daughter, Jed tells her that she would never need a bodyguard in the middle of a resort, but just then, the woman receives a call from her father. Wanting to make fun of the man, Kyle asks why Brandon is so focused, and he replies that every situation has the potential for something dangerous to happen. Soon after, the security guard begins to describe the characteristics of each of the people walking around the airport, leaving the young man impressed by his professionalism. A few minutes later, the group heads for the boarding gate, and Ava ends up being recognized by one of the attendants, who says that his vote already belongs to the current governor. On the other side of the airport, Marty and Hank collect their belongings from the baggage claim alongside their granddaughter Rosa, who carries her favorite teddy bear in her backpack. Before they go down the stairs, the old woman says that she will meet her family at the boarding gates, saying that she needs to do something before they leave. So the girl continues walking towards the plane alongside her grandfather, who tells her many stories about his life as a soldier. During the conversation, Rosa ends up dropping her teddy bear on the floor, but because she's distracted, she doesn't notice that it's no longer in her backpack. Sometime later, Jed and Kyle head for the plane alongside Ava, who is becoming increasingly irritated by the questions her companions are asking about her academic and professional choices. In the middle of the way, the woman sees the teddy bear lying on the ground, but decides to ignore it, and after getting fed up with the pair's comments, she walks away from them. At that moment, Rosa realizes that her favorite toy is no longer in her backpack, and she starts to get desperate, making her run out to look for it. Thanks to this, the girl ends up bumping into Ava, causing her to get her coat dirty. Furious, the woman screams, and after being reprimanded, the young woman runs back to her grandfather. Feeling guilty for having mistreated the girl, Ava decides to get the teddy bear back for her, and after having her favorite toy back, Rosa is extremely happy. Hours later, everyone gets on the plane to start their journey, and Rosa receives a compliment from Danilo, one of the flight attendants, who says that her teddy bear is going to have a great adventure. Realizing that Ava is going to economy class, Brandon warns her that this is not the correct area for her tickets, but she says that the flight is not full, so they can sit wherever they want. So the man decides to allow the woman to sit next to Jed, and Kyle starts making fun of him, saying he's acting like a nanny. Despite being irritated by the young man's comments, Brandon remains silent and goes to his seat. As takeoff begins, the flight attendants start the safety briefing, and Kyle makes fun of Danilo several times, mocking his demonstrations with the equipment. In order to scare her friend, Kyle starts saying that the plane is full of technical problems, which is why there weren't many passengers on the flight. Jed then replies that the plane is emptier than usual because of the time they were traveling, and explains that the airports will be more crowded in a few hours. Just then, a slight turbulence begins, and while Rosa is eating the sweets she got from her grandparents, Marty notices that some birds seem to have collided with one of the turbines. Thanks to this, the passengers feel a tremor for a few seconds, but the pilots manage to keep control of the plane, and Danilo says that everything is under control, leaving Ava calmer. Rosa then looks out of the window and is startled to notice that the turbine is on fire. Realizing that the aircraft is collapsing, the pilots order the passengers to fasten their seatbelts and ask the crew to go into the cabin to receive instructions specific to that emergency. Suddenly, one of the pieces of the turbine is thrown towards the structure, destroying the walls and causing a huge hole throughout the plane. As a result of the difference in pressure, several people are thrown out of their seats and the aircraft begins to fall apart in midair. In the midst of the chaos, everyone desperately tries to hold on, but nothing seems to work, and dozens of passengers are thrown out of the plane. A few seconds later, the plane hits the ocean, and thanks to the impact, most of the people are wiped out, along with Brandon, whose chest is hit by one of the pieces of debris. At the same time, all the seats on the plane are thrown together, wiping out the rest of the survivors who had not yet been hit. After the impact, Ava starts to look around, and is shocked to notice that Kyle has had a piece of his arm removed during the accident. Soon afterwards, the aircraft begins to sink more and more, and the trio realizes that from now on, they are trapped hundreds of meters underground, as well as being surrounded by underwater mountains. While trying to recover, the survivors are surprised by Danilo, who has taken cover in the crew cabin. Just then, the group hears some noises coming from the water, and Ava discovers that Brandon has managed to survive, as well as having rescued Rosa and Marty. The security guard quickly removes the metal object from his body, while Danilo uses his first aid skills to revive the elderly woman. Noticing that her grandfather is not with them, Rosa asks about his whereabouts, but Brandon replies that the old man perished in the accident, and the news leaves the girl devastated. In order for them to have any chance of survival, the security guard explains that everyone must remain calm, and asks Danilo to check the rear area of the plane to make sure it won't be destroyed. The man also explains that they are in an air bubble, and that the aircraft seems to be stuck to the rocks, so they will have some time to come up with a strategy to escape. Danilo says that the pilots had contacted the airport dispatcher before the crash, which is why the search for survivors must have already begun. The problem is that the oxygen is getting lower and lower, and when he checks the tanks in the cabin, the flight attendant discovers that they are completely empty, as his colleague hasn't made the necessary change. Despite this, Marty reveals that one of the passengers had an oxygen tank attached to his body, as he suffered from a severe condition, and Brandon decides to set off in search of the cylinder. Embarrassed, the old woman asks the security guard to retrieve her late husband's cap, and before leaving, the security guard says he will take care of Kyle's injuries when he returns. Brandon then dives down the corridors of the submerged area of the aircraft, and after retrieving the objects, he prepares to return to the group, without even imagining that he is being watched by a large shark. Before he could react, the man was quickly surprised by the predator, which took a powerful bite out of his body. Seconds later, Ava comes across her security guard emerging from the water, but after handing over the objects, Brandon tells her that his friend will have to continue surviving on her own from now on. Upon hearing this, the woman realizes that her friend has been seriously injured, at which point the man is pulled to the bottom by the shark, leaving everyone terrified. Realizing that they will be in danger if they remain there, the group gathers in the crew cabin, and Marty says that all they can do from now on is wait for rescue. So the old woman asks Danilo to get the first aid kit so that she can take care of the large fracture in Kyle's arm. Quickly, Ava picks up the Cape magazines she was reading during the trip, and after positioning the young man's bone back in place, Marty bandages the wound. Thanks to the disappearance of his daughter, the governor ordered several military units to search for the missing plane, but so far none of the teams have been able to find them. In the cabin, the survivors wait for rescue, and Danilo asks how Marty got so much experience in first aid. She replies that she spent several years working as a military paramedic during the war, and it was during this time that she had met her husband Hank. Suddenly, the group notices that the water is starting to turn red, and they realize that the sharks are devouring the bodies of all the victims of the accident. Trying to comfort Rosa, Ava says that several helicopters must already be looking for them, and that soon they will finally be able to return home. At the same time, the military are continuing their search for the missing aircraft, and as they haven't found anything so far, the center is asking them to remain at the site until they have some indication of the plane's location. Analyzing the water level, Ava says that they have about 4 hours before they are completely submerged, but when he hears the noises coming from the structure, Jed says that they will be eliminated much sooner. He explains that the plane has a thin aluminum wall, so they won't last as long as a submarine, which uses thicker metal walls to increase the pressure capacity limit. While they were thinking about what they could do, the aircraft began to glide once again, traveling hundreds of meters across the ocean and stopping just above a gigantic cliff. Despite this, the group manages to stay safely inside the cabin, without even imagining that they are a few meters away from falling into a great ocean abyss. After analyzing the area around the plane, Ava says that they should try to swim to the exit hole, as they are sinking deeper and deeper. Confused, Jed tells her that they are surrounded by hungry sharks, and the woman replies that they need to use something to distract them. Upon hearing this, Rosa reveals that predators hate bubbles, but is reprimanded by Kyle, who says that they shouldn't listen to a child in a situation like this. Soon after, the young man remembers a pair of divers who were boarding that plane, and suggests that the group try to recover the oxygen tanks they had checked in at the airport. However, Danilo explains that although they can access the luggage compartment through a hatch in the cabin, the cylinders would have been emptied so that they could be placed inside the aircraft. In order for them to still have some way to go, Ava tells them that they will need to use the masks and wetsuits, but Jed says that won't be possible. The young man explains that even if they had the right equipment, they wouldn't be able to reach the surface in time, as the oxygen would run out too quickly. Trying to hide her fear, Ava asks the group to check the luggage compartments and goes to the bathroom, where she starts crying because she doesn't know what else can be done. Meanwhile, Jed and Kyle manage to find a pair of swimming goggles in one of the luggage compartments, but are devastated after destroying the equipment by accident. At the same time, one of the military helicopters finds some of the plane's wreckage, and noticing that no survivors seem to have reached the surface, they alert military headquarters. Realizing that they only have a short time before their fuel runs out, the captain says they should carry out a 15-minute search around the area and gather information as quickly as possible. Soon afterwards, the team began to reconnoiter the area, sending a pair of divers to search for the missing aircraft. After a few seconds, the soldiers manage to find the submerged plane, and when they notice that the lights are on, they try to get closer to look for survivors. In the cabin, Rosa sees the divers approaching, and everyone is excited that they have finally been found by the authorities. Quickly, the soldier asks his partner to go to the hole in the aircraft, but before the man can alert his colleagues, the survivors see a shark approaching from behind. Desperate, the group tries to alert the diver, but to no avail, and after a few seconds, he ends up being surprised by the creature, which manages to devour him with ease. With all the delay, the pilots realize that their fuel is getting lower and lower, and decide to alert the military base to bring more helicopters to the region, allowing them to return to the center. Believing that the body of the other diver may be near the entrance, Ava asks Jed to accompany her to the hole in the aircraft so that they can get the oxygen tank that is with the man's body. After analyzing the corridor, the woman said she could see the object floating, but at that moment, the young man slipped and fell into the water. Before he could return to his group, Jed was surprised by the ferocious shark, which bit into his leg, leaving him terrified. Quickly, Ava and Danilo pull the survivor back, but as soon as they get him to the cabin, they discover that the young man has had his leg removed by the predator. So that they can tend to Jed's wounds, Marty asks Rosa to stay on the other side of the curtain and not go near the water under any circumstances. Danilo then takes a belt from one of the compartments in the cabin, allowing the old woman to tourniquet the young man's leg, who says he can't feel his foot. Upon hearing this, Marty decides to reveal that Jed has lost his leg below the knee, and the news leaves him completely devastated, as his dream of competing in triathlons has just been shattered. Now that the situation is under control, Ava asks Danilo to open the luggage compartment, and after taking one of the flares, she decides to set off in search of the diver's suitcase. Very carefully, the woman swims through the flooded luggage compartment, not even realizing that she is not alone. Despite this, Ava manages to find the diver's suitcase with ease, and is startled by an octopus that was hiding behind the object. The survivor then returns to the rest of the group, but noticing that the equipment will only be enough for 4 people, Kyle says that they won't be able to take Jed back, as his situation has deteriorated even further. Devastated, Ava begs her boyfriend to try and hold out a little longer, since after they leave, they will still be traveling to Alaska together. However, Jed tells them that this will no longer be possible, and during the conversation, the group notices something swimming around the cabin, causing everyone to approach the window. Soon after, Marty notices that Ava's boyfriend is no longer alive, and decides to warn her, apologizing for not being able to save the survivor. Upon hearing the news, the woman despairs and tries to resuscitate her partner, but to no avail, and Danilo tries to calm her down. Realizing that she has lost all the people she loved most in her life, Ava begins to cry, saying that she has never had to deal with situations like this. At this point, the aircraft begins to slide once again, causing the cockpit to separate from the rest of the structure. Thanks to this, Ava realizes that the water level is rising even faster, and says that they must leave that place immediately. So the survivors plan to use the vests to create bubbles around them, so they can scare off the sharks. Desperate, Kyle claims that this plan won't work, and reveals that when he was a child, he used to swim with his father, but one day, he had an accident at the bottom of a large swimming pool. As he didn't know how to get back to the surface, the young man says he just held his breath, and while waiting for his father to rescue him, he realized that the man wasn't even trying. By a long shot, Kyle was able to reach the top of the pool again, even after holding his breath for more than 2 minutes. Upon hearing this, Ava says that this time will be more than enough for them to leave that place, and the young man decides to believe his friend. As the group prepares, the cabin begins to collapse and the cockpit becomes more and more detached from the rest of the aircraft. With everything ready, Marty says she doesn't need a wetsuit, as she grew up participating in swimming competitions. Soon after, Ava says goodbye to her boyfriend, and together the survivors prepare to leave the plane. At that moment, the cockpit ends up falling into the abyss, and noticing that the rest of the aircraft is also about to fall, Ava begins to give them instructions on what they need to do. The woman explains that they must remain calm during the escape, and as they will only have 2 oxygen tanks, they will leave one just for Rosa, while the other will be divided between the adults. Noticing that her granddaughter is frightened, Marty tries to calm her down, telling her that Hank will protect her no matter what, and that they will make it safely to the surface. During the planning, the old woman decides to talk to Ava, and asks her to protect Rosa at all costs, as she knows she will only slow the group down if she tries to stay with them. Even though she doesn't want to accept this request, the woman agrees with Marty, and before her granddaughter leaves, she asks her to stay calm, because Ava and her teddy bear will keep her company for as long as she needs them. Realizing that the cabin is about to be destroyed, the survivor says it's time for them to leave, and orders the girl to activate her vest only when they are outside, or if they see any sharks. Rosa and Ava then dive in first, accompanied by Danilo and Kyle, but at this point, Marty realizes that she won't be able to do it, and returns to the air bubble. Devastated, the lady sits on the ground, and before being covered by the water, she asks Hank to protect the granddaughter they love so much. Halfway there, Kyle ends up getting desperate and tries to get back to the air bubble. Thanks to this, the sharks manage to find the young man, causing him to be attacked and quickly eliminated by the predators. As there is nothing that can be done, Danilo continues his escape, and warns Ava about what happened to Kyle. Despite being devastated, the woman decides to keep the plan going, and after picking up the cylinders, they prepare to leave. Without wasting any time, Danilo positions himself outside with Rosa, and after allowing Ava to breathe through the tank one last time, the pair pull on the rope of the vests, causing them to start climbing. However, before she can escape, the woman is surprised by one of the sharks, but instead of attacking her, the animal decides to head for Kyle's body. Realizing that more predators are approaching, Ava tries to swim to the hole, but at that moment the aircraft begins to fall, causing her to be pulled back. Desperate, the survivor swims as fast as she can, managing to get out of the plane at the last second and dodging one of the wings. Thanks to the current created by the aircraft, Ava's vest is unable to keep her afloat, and she ends up losing consciousness after running out of oxygen. Despite this, the survivor reaches the surface after a few seconds, allowing her to be woken up. Soon afterwards, Ava finds the teddy bear floating in the water, and noticing that Rosa and Danilo are no longer there, she becomes desperate. Just then, a fleet of helicopters appears in the sky, and they launch a steel cable to rescue the woman, who is relieved to discover that the pair have already been rescued by the soldiers. Realizing that her grandmother has been left behind, Rosa begins to cry and hugs Ava, who reveals that she has recovered her stuffed animal. Upon hearing this, the girl remembers that her grandfather had said he would like to have a teddy bear like that if he ever got into trouble, and decides to throw the object back into the ocean. Finally, the survivors wait until they are taken back to the city, feeling extremely relieved that they are still alive after all that disaster. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.